Let me say, first of all, on behalf of my daughters Caroline and Catherine, thank you to Tim Phillips for defending our right to roast marshmallows. We all knew the threats we were facing were big, but who knew they were that big? I got to tell you, Caroline, our 6-year-old, her approach to roasting marshmallows, she says, "Daddy, stick it in the fire, light it on fire." That's kind of the AFP approach. We don't do anything halfway. You know, I spent much of last month, back in Washington, D.C. So it is great to be back in America. Now, I'm sorry to tell y'all that by virtue of your being here today, on Monday morning, each of you is going to be audited by the IRS. You're right, they don't work on Monday on Labor Day. Or for that matter, any other day of the year. So thank you for the courage of your convictions. You know, back in Washington, there's a diet that is now very, very popular. It's called the Obama diet. Works very, very well. You simply let Putin eat your lunch every day. And it is sad just how true that is. Listen, I'm here today more than anything else to tell each and every one of you, thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Because of your leadership, because of your passion, America is waking up and America is turning around. We are winning victory after victory after victory on the national scale, whether it's fighting back efforts to restrict guns, whether it's on immigration, whether it's standing for religious liberty. Americans are waking up to get back to the principles we were founded on. And AFP is front and center leading that fight. We are 66 days out from the November elections. 66 days from now, just over 1,500 hours, we're going to retake the United States Senate and we're going to retire Harry Reid. So I'm here to say thank you, but this summit is also a call to action. This summit is a call to action. Every man, woman, and child who is here, we have 66 days and we got a job to do. I'm going to tell you 4 key issues that are going to be front and center between now and Election Day. Number 1, no amnesty. President Obama has made a decision to make this election in 2014 a national referendum on amnesty. If you support amnesty, vote Democrat. If you oppose amnesty, throw Harry Reid out. You know, in the state of Texas, border security is not some abstract theory to us. It is something we live with each and every day. It's one of the things I enjoy sitting on the Senate Judiciary Committee, listening to senators like Chuck Schumer and Dick Durbin lecture John Cornyn and me on border security. Now, I understand that Manhattan is very concerned with their security with the Bronx. But it's a little bit different on 2,000 miles of the Rio Grande. You know, the president is right about one thing that's happening on the border right now. It is a humanitarian crisis, but it is a crisis of his own creation. It is the direct consequence of President Obama's lawlessness. A few months ago, President Obama came to the state of Texas. He had time to come to a couple of Democratic Party fundraisers, to swill some Chardonnay with fat cats in the Democratic Party, and he didn't have a minute to head down to the border and see the crisis that he has caused. You know, I got to tell you, we tried to help him out. We actually tweeted to the president a map quest of driving from here to the border. That didn't work, so I've got a different plan. Tonight, I am officially extending an invitation to President Barack Obama to come join me at the border in Texas. And I figured out the only way there is a chance in heaven he might come. I'm inviting him to come to a golf course. And there actually is, if you go to Big Bend, there's a wonderful resort called Lajitas with a golf course right on the border. In fact, the 11th hole, it's pretty amazing. The 11th hole, the pin is on the other side of the Rio Grande. And so you can only go for a hole in one because you can't cross the river and putt. So I'm expecting to get a call back from the president any day now accepting this invitation. You want to understand what's happening in the border? A simple example of the numbers illustrates everything. 3 years ago, there were roughly 6,000 unaccompanied children trying to enter this country illegally. In 2011, then in 2012, the president illegally granted amnesty to some 800,000 people who had entered as kids. Now, the foreseeable result of that, the predicted result of that, if you grant amnesty to people who come as kids, it creates a huge incentive for more and more and more children to come. And so we saw the numbers grow from 6,000 just 3 years ago to 90,000 this year. And next year it's expected to be 145,000. These are little boys and little girls that are being physically assaulted, that are being sexually assaulted. And I'm proud to tell you, we have seen some leadership in Washington. The House of Representatives has stood up and led. I introduced 2 pieces of legislation. One, to make absolutely clear in law that the President of the United States has no authority prospectively to grant amnesty to anyone here illegally. And number 2, legislation providing that the federal government will reimburse the states for calling up the National Guard like our Governor Rick Perry has done. And let me speak in praise of Republicans in the House of Representatives, because Republicans in the House of Representatives stood together, said this is a crisis on the border, this is national security, we have terrorists coming across the border, let's come together, and they passed both pieces of legislation I had introduced in the Senate. And on the other side of the Capitol, Harry Reid and the Senate Democrats. You know, oddly enough, they get that reception everywhere they go. Harry Reid and the Senate Democrats said, we won't even allow a vote on anything to secure the border. We won't allow a vote on anything to block amnesty. Instead, Harry Reid said, I'm sending the senators home. It's the month of August. Martha's Vineyard beckons. Republicans in Washington are standing up and leading. And Harry Reid and the Democrats, the do-nothing Senate, are ignoring the national security priorities of this country. Now, in the next 66 days, the president has said there's a good chance he's going to try it again. There's a good chance he's going to try again to illegally grant amnesty to millions more people. Let me be absolutely clear. Doing that is utterly lawless. And every Democrat in the Senate who stood with Harry Reid blocking legislation to stop this amnesty, every Democrat in the Senate bears responsibility for that amnesty. So for the folks who are here from Arkansas, from Louisiana, from North Carolina, from Colorado, from New Mexico, from Alaska. There's some Democratic senators we need to introduce to the private sector. There's some Democratic senators who bear the responsibility for President Obama's amnesty. And there's some Democratic senators who sorely need to lose their exemption from Obamacare. And that's the second critical thing this election is about: stopping Obamacare. You know, there are a lot of folks in Washington who think the way you win elections is you go to the mushy middle, you blur everything, you stand for nothing. It doesn't work. In 2010, the American people stood together, we drew a line in the sand, and we said, let's repeal every single word of Obamacare. In 2012, we ran back to the world, as Reagan said, of painting in pale pastels rather than bold, clear colors. Let me tell you something right now. A lot of the men and women in this room bled last summer and last fall in the fight to defund Obamacare. If you listen to the Democrats, if you listen to the mainstream media, although I repeat myself, they will tell you the fight that you and I waged last summer, last fall, didn't succeed. Well, I think the proof is in the pudding. As a result of that fight, millions of Americans stood up together and elevated the national debate about the incredible harms Obamacare is causing, about the millions of Americans who've lost their jobs, about the millions of Americans who've been forced into part-time work, about the millions of Americans who've lost their health care and their doctors. As a result of that fight, President Obama's popularity has plummeted. As a result of that fight, Obamacare's popularity has plummeted. It has plummeted with young people, with Hispanics, with independents. It's even plummeted with Democrats. You want to know what the 2014 election is about? Here's a very simple principle. If you like your senator, you can keep your senator. But if your senator is responsible for screwing up the economy, for costing you your job, for forcing you into part-time work, for taking away your health care, for taking away your doctor, and then for doing nothing about it, then the American people have a direct and immediate answer. Let me tell you something very clearly. I'm convinced we're going to win in 2014, and 2016 is going to be even better. And in the year 2017, a Republican president in the Rose Garden is going to sign a bill repealing every word of Obamacare. You know, oddly enough, that's the same thing my wife Heidi says to me when I go to the gym. The third issue this election is going to come down to is restoring America's leadership in the world. Now, this week, President Obama helpfully told us he doesn't have a strategy yet. I'm sure everyone was shocked to hear this. You know, if you remember President Reagan, when they asked him, "What is your strategy in the Cold War?" he said, "It's very simple. We win, they lose." It's almost as if President Obama read that and got it backwards. A couple of folks took a minute to get that. All across this world, America has receded from leadership in the world. We've abandoned our friends and allies, and the world has gotten much, much more dangerous. You look at our unshakable friendship and alliance with the nation of Israel. America should stand with Israel. Just a few weeks ago, when rockets were raining down on Israel from Hamas, when terror tunnels were coming up from underground from Hamas, and the Obama administration, the FAA, banned every American flight into the nation of Israel. I'll tell you, I was proud to stand up and ask a series of hard questions, including number one, has President Obama just launched an economic boycott on the nation of Israel? And I pointed out that the FAA, in this unprecedented act, they don't ban flights to Pakistan, to Yemen, to Afghanistan. They don't even ban flights to much of Ukraine. And Ukraine just shot down a passenger airline with a Russian Buk missile. So why then was differential punishment visited on the nation of Israel, and why was it at the exact same time John Kerry arrived in the Middle East with $47 million for Gaza that will go to Hamas? Well, let me tell you, I raised that question. New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg got on an airplane and flew to Tel Aviv. And the American people nationally started asking, why is this president not standing with Israel? And within 36 hours, thanks to your leadership, the FAA lifted the ban on flights to Israel. You look at Russia right now. Sadly, the state of the world is the Russian bear is encountering the Obama kitty cat. You know what? The United States of America has never been a kitty cat. The reason Putin feels no fear to march into his neighbors, the reason why our allies up and down Europe are terrified of what's next, is because this president, as he puts it, is leading from behind. We need a president who will stand up and use every tool at our disposal. And there are a host of tools short of military conflict, like putting anti-ballistic missile batteries in Poland and the Czech Republic. Like approving every single application to export liquid natural gas so we can hit Russia where it hurts, in the cash register. And then you have ISIS. ISIS is the face of evil. ISIS, these guys are so extreme, they were thrown out of Al-Qaeda for being too extreme. That ain't easy. Right now, today in Iraq and Syria, ISIS is crucifying Christians. I don't mean that hypothetically. I don't mean that figuratively. This isn't just something that happened 2,000 years ago. These monsters are nailing Christians to trees. Right now, in Iraq, ISIS is taking American journalists, cutting their heads off, and mocking America to the world. America has always been reluctant to use military force, but we have never shied away from defending the United States of America. When you're dealing with monsters who are crucifying Christians and beheading American journalists, when you're dealing with monsters who are training upwards of 100 of Americans right now to come back here and visit the same terror on Americans here, number one, we need to not let into this country any American who is fighting with ISIS. And number two, ISIS says they want to go back and reject modernity. Well, I think we should help them. We ought to bomb them back to the Stone Age. The fourth and final issue that this election will come down to is defending our constitutional rights. If you support the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, then vote Harry Reid out. By the way, in Texas, gun control means hitting what you aim at. If you support the Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights to privacy, vote Harry Reid out. And President Obama, you're next. If you support the 10th Amendment and want to repeal every word of Common Core, then vote Harry Reid out. And if you support the First Amendment, our freedom of speech, our freedom of religion, if you celebrate the Supreme Court's tremendous victory for religious liberty in the Hobby Lobby case, if you're tired of the IRS targeting citizens for their political beliefs, if you're tired of the most corrupt Department of Justice in history obstructing justice, and believe it is time to impeach Eric Holder. If you are tired of seeing 50 Democratic senators in Washington, D.C. put their name to a constitutional amendment to repeal the free speech protections of the First Amendment, because they are so terrified of each and every one of you, if you believe in the First Amendment, vote Harry Reid out. Let me say this finally. Each of you are here because we are part of a grassroots fire that is sweeping this country. We are building an army. How many of y'all have your cell phones with you? Or as President Obama calls them, your DHS communicators. If you're willing to be part of a grassroots army to turn this country about, I want to ask each of you with your cell phones to text the word DREAM to 33733. Let me give you that to you again. The number is 33733. And text the word DREAM. Because what we're fighting to do is exactly what the sign says: defend the American dream. I'm going to ask every person in this room in November 2014 to go and vote 10 times. Now, Katrina, I'm not suggesting voter fraud. We're not Democrats. But let me tell you how every one of you can vote 10 times. Go and vote and find 9 other people who wouldn't otherwise show up and get them to show up and vote. There are 3,000 people here. If each of you get 9 other people, that's 30,000. And if each of them get 9 other people, that's 300,000. That is enough to swing the United States Senate. That is enough for this room to retire Harry Reid. And so I close as I opened, simply saying to each of you, thank you. I am profoundly optimistic and hopeful. The American people are rising up to take our country back, to restore the American dream, to get back to the free market principles and constitutional liberties this country was built on, and each of you are leading the fight, and I am honored to stand side by side with each of you. Thank you, and God bless you.